The hospital turned the veteran away, cold and indifferent, just another case dismissed. But the next morning, everything changed. His former Marine brothers showed up in full uniform, and the message they delivered spoke louder than any medical policy. Jack Harris stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER waiting room, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the stubborn pain that had been gnawing at his side for days. He'd served 2 tours in Iraq and another in Afghanistan. He'd faced worse than this, but what stung the most wasn't the pain. It was the nurse's tone, clipped and dismissive, as if his suffering were some inconvenience to be processed and pushed aside. "We can't treat you without a current insurance plan," she said, without looking up from her clipboard. "There's a community clinic across town. Maybe try them." Jack didn't argue. Marines are trained to adapt, to endure. But as he turned away, a quiet humiliation settled in his chest. The same country he'd once risked his life for now saw him as a burden, a man past his use, discarded and invisible. He climbed into his old Ford pickup, the driver's seat creaking under his weight. The dashboard still held a faded photograph of his platoon from Camp Lejeune, laughing, young, full of swagger. As he sat in the silence, something inside him stirred. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was the sting of rejection. But Jack Harris was done being invisible. The automatic glass doors hissed shut behind Jack Harris, sealing off the sterile chill of the emergency room. Outside, the air was humid and heavy, typical of late spring in Wilmington, North Carolina. But Jack hardly noticed the weather. His focus was on the echo of the nurse's voice in his mind. "There's nothing we can do without proof of insurance," he had tried to explain. His coverage had lapsed last month, paperwork tied up in red tape at the VA. He wasn't looking for a handout. He just needed help, a scan maybe, something to rule out whatever was causing the stabbing pain in his abdomen. But to them, he was just another uninsured man with a vague complaint, nothing urgent. Not their problem. Jack paused in the parking lot, one hand on the tailgate of his truck trying to catch his breath. A dull, familiar ache spread across his ribs. He'd felt pain before, shrapnel in Fallujah, heat stroke in Helmand. But this was different, deeper, not just physical. It was the feeling of being turned away, not as a patient, but as a person. He climbed into his truck with slow effort, the seatbelt click sounding louder than usual in the silence. For a long moment, he sat there staring at the hospital's entrance. Nurses bustled through the lobby. A security guard leaned on the front desk. Life went on behind the glass, while he, one of their own once, was pushed to the margins. As he turned the key in the ignition, a thought surfaced, uninvited but persistent. If this could happen to me, who else have they turned away? And that question, small but sharp, lingered as he drove home. What he didn't know yet was that the next morning, that same hospital would face a reckoning it hadn't seen coming. The sun was already setting when Jack pulled into his driveway. His modest one-story house sat on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, where American flags still fluttered on porches and neighbors waved from lawn chairs. It was the kind of place where people remembered your name, but not always your scars. Inside, the house was dim and still. Jack didn't turn on the lights. He dropped his keys onto the kitchen counter, the jingle breaking the silence. Then he moved slowly to the worn recliner in his living room, sat down, and let out a long, tired breath. The pain in his side was worse now, sharper, like a knife twisting in place. He clenched his jaw and tried to breathe through it, refusing to cry out. Marines don't make noise over pain, but it wasn't just his side that ached. It was the weight of the hospital's rejection that pressed heavier on him now. The cold tone, the blank expressions, the way no one asked his name, let alone listened to his story. His eyes scanned the room, the framed certificate of honorable discharge. On the wall, the shadow box with his medals, the folded flag from his father's casket, symbols of sacrifice, of service. And yet, none of it had been enough. In the stillness, Jack's mind wandered to old voices, men who'd called him brother once, back when his name meant something more than just another patient file. He hadn't spoken to most of them in years. Life had drifted them apart, but suddenly their absence felt like a void he couldn't ignore. Jack stood, gripping the armrest for balance. He walked to the hallway closet, opened it, and reached up for a dusty shoebox tucked in the back. Inside, among old patches and a rusted Zippo lighter, was a list of names and numbers. Handwritten, faded, sacred. The silence in his house was absolute, but Jack's pulse had started to beat with something else. Resolve. Quiet, yes, but steady. He didn't know who would answer. He only knew he had to try. The attic smelled like cedar and dust, an oddly comforting mix. Jack hadn't been up there in years. The old wooden ladder creaked under his weight, but he climbed it slowly, one hand pressed against the ache in his side. The box he was looking for sat at the far end, buried under a tarp and a stack of yellowing newspapers. It was a military-issued trunk, the kind he and his squad had called a memory coffin. Olive green, scratched from years of travel. Jack pulled it forward, knelt beside it, and popped the latches with practiced ease. The lid groaned open. Inside, sand-stained camo uniforms, a pair of dog tags, old ration packs, and a black binder of mission briefs from Kandahar. But the real treasure lay beneath, a bundle of letters, each with different handwriting. One was from Thompson, another from Rivas, one from Jenkins. They weren't just letters. They were lifelines from men who'd once watched his back when bullets were flying. Jack sat cross-legged, holding one from 2009. Thompson had scribbled, "If you ever need me, I mean it. Call. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. He hadn't thought about those words in years, but now they pulsed with new urgency. His flip phone, always charged out of habit, buzzed gently in his shirt pocket. It was 1:43 a.m., but that didn't matter. He opened the contacts, scrolled to T, paused, and then he pressed call. 3 rings, 4. Then a voice, raspy, half asleep but unmistakably familiar. Jack. And just like that, something old and solid returned to Jack's chest. A connection, a bond that hadn't rusted with time. "I need a favor," Jack said quietly. Maybe a few uniforms." By dawn, the message had traveled farther than Jack could have imagined. Thompson hadn't asked for details, just enough to understand. Jack's voice, the weight behind it, said more than words ever could. Within the hour, he'd looped in. Rivas, who still lived in Jacksonville, and Jenkins, who now ran a welding shop out in Indiana. Word spread fast. The old squad had a Facebook group, quiet for years, mostly birthday wishes and grainy throwback photos, but suddenly it lit up like a flare in the night. Jack's message was simple. Turned away at the ER. No insurance, no help. I'm okay, but I don't feel okay. And that was all it took. They started replying one after another. Short messages, angry messages, heartfelt ones. Some hadn't spoken in years, some barely remembered each other's faces. But none of it mattered. They remembered Jack. They remembered what it meant to say, "I got your 6, Thompson took charge. Let's make a statement, full dress, we show up, no yelling, no signs, just presence." Uniforms came out of closets and footlockers across the country. Boots were polished, medals were pinned. Even Garcia, who'd lost a leg to an IED, arranged for transport. Nobody wanted attention. They wanted justice, respect, and most of all, they wanted Jack to know he wasn't alone. Jack watched it all unfold from his kitchen table, eyes fixed on the group chat lighting up his phone. His pain hadn't gone away, but something had shifted. In his chest, where shame had taken root, something stronger now grew, dignity. By nightfall, 12 men had confirmed. More were trying to make it in time. Jack set down his phone and looked out the window. The hospital had treated him like a statistic. Tomorrow they'd remember he was a Marine. Long before sunrise, engines growled to life across state lines. In Georgia, Jenkins zipped his blues over his broad chest, the medals clinking softly as he climbed into his pickup. He hadn't worn the full-dress uniform since his retirement ceremony, but as he stood in front of the mirror, it fit just fine, tight in the shoulders, sure, but proud. He tucked a folded American flag under the passenger seat. "Just in case," he muttered with a half-smile. In Tennessee, Rivas helped Garcia into his own uniform, carefully threading the Navy Cross onto his friend's lapel. Garcia's prosthetic clicked softly as he adjusted his balance, his eyes sharp beneath his campaign. "Cover. Let's go wake 'em up," he said. And in South Carolina, Thompson gathered a small group of local vets from their old VFW hall. The buzz of coffee pots and whispered checklists filled the room. There was no plan for confrontation, just quiet resolve. They didn't need to shout. The uniforms would do the talking. By 6:15 a.m., Jack's street was lined with headlights. One by one, the Marines stepped out. Dress blues, creased slacks, polished shoes. The morning light caught the brass buttons and ribbons, making them glow in the soft Carolina dawn. They didn't knock. They didn't call. They just stood in formation on the sidewalk facing Jack's house, waiting. Jack opened his front door and froze. For a long moment, he didn't move. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But the look in his eyes said everything. He stepped outside, chest rising, back straight, pain momentarily forgotten. No one saluted. No one had to. They had come for him. And by the time they all turned toward the hospital, a quiet storm had begun to form. At exactly 7:02 a.m., the first uniformed Marine stepped onto the hospital's front sidewalk. Within minutes, they formed 2 clean lines, 12 in total, standing tall, shoulder to shoulder, their boots aligned like they were back on base. No signs, no megaphones, just presence. A powerful, quiet line of men who had once faced fire together now faced something colder, bureaucracy. Jack was at the center, dressed in his own blues, slightly faded but dignified. He moved with a slight limp, the pain in his side flaring with each step, but he stood tall. To him, this wasn't about vengeance, it was about visibility, about being seen in a system that too often pretended people like him didn't exist. People stopped to stare. A nurse arriving for her shift dropped her coffee. A hospital security guard radioed for backup. Someone behind the reception desk muttered, "What is this? Some kind of protest?" But no one spoke. That was the point. The hospital administrator, Dr. Byron McClure, arrived 10 minutes later, his tie slightly askew and expression tight with discomfort. He stepped outside, looking from one Marine to the next, then directly at Jack. "Mr. Harris," he began, trying to inject calm authority into his voice. "This really isn't necessary. If you'll step inside, I'm sure we can." Jack didn't move. Neither did anyone else. A woman from the local paper, drawn by a tip from a morning commuter, snapped a photo. Then another, and then a third. This one capturing the steely gaze of Garcia, his navy cross glinting in the sunlight. By the time the news van pulled up, Dr. McClure had stopped talking. He realized what Jack already knew. This wasn't about him anymore. Inside the hospital's executive wing, Dr. Byron McClure paced his office like a man waiting for a storm to pass. Except this storm had names, faces, and medals, and it was parked right outside his front doors. The phone rang again, his assistant sounding anxious. "Channel 5 is here now, and Channel 11, do you want me to—" "No," McClure snapped, then softening. "No, just give me a minute." He looked out the window. The Marines hadn't moved, not once. The line was tight, unmoving, like a quiet threat, but not the kind that makes demands, the kind that makes a point. He thought back to yesterday. Harris. That name was on a clipboard somewhere. Standard intake, no ID, no insurance, symptoms listed as abdominal discomfort. The triage nurse followed protocol. So did the front desk. So did he. But watching them now, standing in full dress in formation, he understood something the paperwork never could. They weren't here for attention. They were here to remind him what respect looks like. He stepped out of his office and made his way down to the lobby. As he pushed through the main doors, the murmurs hushed. Even the press stayed quiet. Jack didn't move. Neither did the others. Dr. McClure approached carefully. "Mr. Harris, if I may, I'd like to personally invite you back inside for a full evaluation. No billing, no paperwork." Jack looked at him, measured. "This isn't just about me. No," McClure replied, and to his credit he sounded like he meant it. "We failed you, we failed all of you, but we're listening now." For the first time, Jack broke formation. Just one step forward, a quiet nod, nothing more. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. By late morning, the line of Marines had become more than a quiet statement. It was now a symbol. The photo of them standing in formation had gone viral. Local news ran it every hour. "Veteran turned away, Brotherhood responds." But the real story was unfolding outside the camera frame. Patients in the waiting room began to whisper. Some stepped outside just to see them. A few vets, there for appointments of their own, saluted softly as they passed. A nurse on her smoke break offered coffee to Rivas and Garcia. "What you guys are doing," she said, her voice thick, It's something else." Inside, the hospital board scrambled. The legal department advised restraint. PR wanted talking points. But none of that mattered when Jack was finally called in, not through the usual channels, but by the director himself. He didn't wait in line. He didn't fill out forms. He was escorted straight to an exam room where a top GI specialist waited. Jack didn't smile. He didn't thank anyone. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about getting treatment. It was about changing the story for every vet who didn't have 12 brothers in uniform to stand behind him. Outside, a woman in scrubs took a photo with Jenkins. Another nurse hugged Thompson, whispering something in his ear that made his lip tremble. It wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was shame, respect, awakening. The crowd grew. Other veterans began arriving, not to protest but to witness, to support. Some brought lawn chairs. One man played taps on a trumpet from the sidewalk. People cried, strangers clapped. No one dared break the silence of the Marine line. By the time Jack walked out, bandaged, tired but standing proud, the hospital wasn't the same place. He'd walked away from just a day before, and the world was watching. 1 week later, a new sign was mounted near the hospital's entrance. It read, "Veterans First Access Point. No ID required, no one left behind." Inside, a dedicated wing was being renovated. Small, quiet, efficient. Staffed by clinicians who volunteered, backed by a fund built from community donations. The hospital had changed its policies, not just for PR, not just for Jack, but because the silence of those 12 Marines had spoken louder than outrage ever could. Jack returned once more, not for treatment, but to visit. He walked through the freshly painted hallway, soft blue walls, plaques honoring local vets, and nodded to the nurse who had once turned him away. She met his eyes this time, and she didn't look away. He didn't gloat. That wasn't his style. Jack wasn't a hero by his own standards, just a man who'd been pushed too far, and reminded the system who he was. Outside, the sun was bright, the breeze lifting the corner of a new flag raised over the front lawn. Just beneath the U.S. colors flew the Marine Corps emblem. He stood there a long time, hands in his pockets. His phone buzzed. Group message. "Thompson, check the news. LA Hospital copied the policy. VA too." Jack smiled faintly. One by one, his brothers had gone back home, their job done. No medals, no speeches, just boots on the ground, mission complete. As he turned to leave, a young nurse called out, "Mr. Harris, thank you for not giving up." He paused, then offered a quiet, almost imperceptible nod. I didn't do it alone. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and join a community that honors the strength of real people and real stories. Tell us, where are you watching from? And which moment in this story stayed with you the most? We read every comment. You're not alone here.